Hello, welcome to the first episode of the Game of the Week series. So our first game will be Murdzia against Nurkiewicz. The game was played in the Polish league. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6. So the game starts as a King's Indian, bishop e2, short castle, bishop g5. So this is the so-called Averbach system against the King's Indian, which is recommended in the Chessable course. h6, bishop e3, e5, and d5. So everything is pretty normal up to this moment. Here black has some different choices. For example, black can play a5 here or can play knight d7. These things can very often transpose to each other because once the knight comes to c5, then it needs some help with this a pawn not to be chased away by b4. So this is one idea, and other main move in this position is to play c6. And in such situations, black is sometimes hoping for play against white center or on the queen side by playing b5 at some moment. However, in this game, black went for a rare continuation, knight e8. So basically his intentions are very clear. He wants to push f5, which is the most typical pawn move in the King's Indian defense. And why I like the Averbach system, because like for example in the Mardel Plata variation, which is the main line of the King's Indian. Let me show what I mean by that. So like knight f3, short castle, bishop e2, e5, short castle, knight c6, d5, knight e7, and knight e1. So this is the classical main line. Black plays knight e7 or knight e8, and then comes with this f5, f4 idea and attack against our king, because it is already castled here on the short side. However, in the Averbach system, our big advantage is that the king is not yet castled, so we have different ways to meet this f5, not to castle into that attack, but on the contrary, we can even attack black's king in some of the cases if black is like very ambitious there. So most of the games, like vast majority of the games, continued here with queen d2, which is a good move. So now the h6 pawn, of course, is hanging. So black plays king h7, and now comes a very important and thematic idea. It's g4. So with this move, we are getting ready to face f5, and basically we completely stopped black's counterplay on the king side. So besides f5, black cannot really play for anything else, and you can see the advantage that this king is obviously not going to the short side now, but it will go to the long side. Most of the games f5 was played, and then we just take ef5, bishop f5, and this is the position I was talking about, that okay, black is just still making this break. Actually his king will be rather in trouble than white's king, so we just play knight f3, for example. So it's very important that we manage to get rid of black's kingside pawns, because now our pieces are just very, very comfortable here. Pawns are not attacking those at all, and for example knight d7 can happen, and here there is a nice move for white h4, basically anticipating knight f6 from black. So any knight ever comes to f6, we can reply with knight g5, and in case black would take, we just take back with a check and open the h file for the rook and recover the material on f6. Otherwise the knight is going to e6. Black's position is pretty horrible. This king once again is extremely weak, and we just castle long with a big advantage. So this is a very good reaction, and this is what most players did in this position. However, in this game, a very interesting idea was employed by white, and that's why I would like to show this game. So there is a different way to meet this f5 idea here. White played queen to c1. So at first it looks like a very awkward move, like why not to d2? It's so much more natural. Of course, the pawn on h6 is hanging again, so black played king h7, and now h4. So this is the idea of white, a very nice one once again. So the point is that this h4 is not directly but indirectly stopping f5. Because in the game c5 was played here, so in case of f5, h5 is just super strong. So again, using this weakened position of the king on h7, we can see the main point of king c1 by looking at this variation of f4. So if the queen would be on d2, then this whole thing is not possible at all because our bishop is just trapped on e3. However, here we can insert this hg6, king g6, bishop d2, and black's king is, to say the least, very weak. We will undermine black's f4 pawn by g3, and according to the computer, this position is already hopeless for black, which is not a surprise. Once again, the king is the most active piece for black, which is not good in the middle games. So this was the very nice idea behind this move. And if black plays g5, then again an important positional idea. We don't want f4 to come, so we just take on f5, bishop f5, and g4, basically stabilizing on the light squares. And we can see that black's idea of pushing this pawn, creating space advantage on the king side completely failed, and white will just play f3, knight f2, bishop d3 eventually, and we have this beautiful e4 square, and black's minor pieces are just mightily struggling here. And to be honest, the engine even recommends something like bishop f6 here, which means that even knight g5 sacrificing a piece is already an idea for white. So really an awful position for black. So a very, very remarkable idea once again from white to prepare f5 this indirect way. So instead black went for c5. So he is saying that, okay, he cannot play f5, but at least he will try to close the king side and hope for a sort of fortress. So of course we play h5, g5, and g4. So basically, if this thing happens in the king's Indian, so white manages to close the king side, and the game is going on for 2 results after this, like objectively speaking, because like with black to win such position is, if white is not making some big mistakes, is not really possible. So in the king's Indian, black should play on the king side, white should play on the queen side. So white has the space advantage on the queen side, so obviously it's a big plus for white at this moment. So black played bishop d7, f3, knight c7, and a3 was played. So sometimes, when black is preparing for this b5 break, white players tend to play a4, which would be a huge mistake at this moment, because black has a great move a5, and it's really a fortress. So now no pawn breaks are possible. I mean, it's very hard to imagine that f4 or b4 will be ever a real idea for white in this game, so it will be just a draw, basically. But of course, a3 was played by white, a5, knight h3. Again, maybe a sacrifice on g5. It's not really something we want to do, but black has to take care of it, so bishop f6. And I believe here a mistake happened, because simply the thing is that white doesn't have to rush here at all, because our advantage is not because we are better developed or we have some initiative or some type of dynamic advantage, but it's simply because we have the only good pawn break in the position b4, and or to put it in another perspective, if something happens on the queen side, it's opening up somehow because of the space advantage provided by the d5 pawn. It's always going to be better for white. So it means that we have a lot of time, and I just looked at some variations just to show how the game could have gone. So let's say knight f2. So black plays knight a6. We castle, so we just finished development, and our king is perfectly safe here. Nothing is happening on the king side. Queen e7, queen c2, rook b8, rook b1. So both pieces are bringing the forces to the queen side where the game can where the game will be decided. And now black has basically two strategies. So one of them is to play b5, so to initiate play on the queen side, but therefore weakening the structure, or just to wait and let white show what he has, how he wants to break the possession. So let's first see what happens with b5. So here again, it's a must to take for white. We don't want to allow b4, and the position will be simply too closed to win. So we need some space, obviously. So take. So we trade pieces here. Bishop b5, rook takes b5, and now bishop d2 is a nice move, basically opening up the e3 square for the knight. So since this bishop from d7 is gone, f5 is not under control anymore. Also, since black traded the b pawn, the c4 square is available for this knight. And once again, since the b pawn is gone, a pawn is isolated. So it's a pretty pleasant position for white. Again, it's quite tough to defend with black. So that would have happened if black tries to play more active, let's say. And the other is when he's just waiting. So basically queen e8. So bishop d2. It's important to see that the bishop is not doing much on e3 at this moment. I mean, it's just hitting kind of a wall. So it's better to bring it to d2, where it will support the b4 idea. So bishop d8, knight d1, king g7. So from this moment on, I will just pass with black. This is kind of a perfect fortress in a way that it cannot be like improved. So knight e3. White is just simply improving the position. The knight is nice on e3. Once again, anytime b5 would come, it's ready to jump to c4 after the trade, but also it is eyeing the f5 square. So king h7. And now a nice positional idea, which is good to know. So we don't necessarily, once again, have to rush with b4. So, I mean, one way would be to regroup this knight to d3 and play b4. I mean, it is possible and okay, but there is even better. So white can just play bishop d3, king g7, queen d1, king h7, bishop c2. So like changing the queen and the bishop, and now bishop a4 is the positional threat. And once the light square bishops are getting traded, the knight is going to f5. Everything will be even much more difficult for black, and then we will really play for b4 at some moment with the knight on f5. And eventually this position is should collapse for black. So this is one way to break down this passive defense. So this would have been the correct play. So once again, white has the time. He doesn't have to rush and to be afraid that b4 will be not available later. It will be. So it's very tough for black to completely close the position. So in the game, white played b4 right away. I mean, and it looks fine because, I mean, okay, if, you know, black takes, it's opening up, and the position is opening up what we want, but still it would have been better first to just finish development, because in the game b6 was played, which is of course not punishing white, but actually a takes b4 was a very decent alternative and very decent move for black. So after a b4, c b4, knight a2, knight a6. So of course this b4 pawn will fall, but we have to take the time to take it, and actually it's, you know, those moves will be still not short castle and knight f2, which will recover the b4 pawn. So it means that our development is suffering a little bit. So rook b1, and now b5 is very strong. And actually black has very good chances to equalize here or keep this position together. Knight takes b4, knight b4, rook b4. And here there are two ways. And black can play knight to a6 followed by b4 once the rook retreats. It's quite complicated. position, and the more equalizing type of ways, b takes on c4, bishop takes on c4, and knight b5. So this is a tactical idea, activating the knight. The point is that if white would take on b5, then there is queen a5, and this rook is pinned. So again, not so easy. So that was definitely the correct way for black. This was a chance to fight back on the queen side. And why was it possible? Once again, because the development was not properly finished by white. Instead, b6 happened, and now white took on a5, which is good. And by this move, we can again discuss a very important positional detail. So b takes c5 was also good. In such cases, normally the question is that what happens on dc5, because it's true that we have a protected pass pawn, but the knight on d6 can also be a wonderful blockader of it. But since black's minor pieces are so awkwardly placed after queen b2, knight e8, rook b1, so now the b6 pawn is hanging. Black is not really in time, because after rook a6, bishop c5 is winning a pawn, thanks to the unprotected square of the b8 knight. So it was also good b takes a5, and black took back with the pawn. So normally the question is rook a5, and normally this is the thing. For example, I many years ago in such position, the king side was not even closed. I played b5 in such position, which is an extremely bad move. The thing is that I simply did not like that in this position white structure is worse, on paper, because we have an isolated pawn. But what I failed to understand is that once we push this pawn to a4, eventually the position is still opening up for white on the queen side. So just imagine a knight on b3, and then we can even get rid of this pawn and open more files on the queen side. So as long as the game is going on the queen side, it's always good for white in the King's Indian. Like, it's really like 99% of the cases it's like that. So for example, here queen b2, rook a6 protecting the pawn, a4, queen e7, castle, rook c8, knight f2, queen f8, again just waiting, and the knight is coming towards b3 as I illustrated. Then we double on the a file, play a5 eventually, and have a nice advantage. So that would have happened in the case of rook a5, so we don't have to be scared that we have a pawn weakness, because actually we will get rid of this pawn weakness eventually. So black played ba5, but again, what happened with this trade, the b file is open, so white has the necessary space to enter black's position, and the game really goes in a textbook way from now on. So white castles, knight a6, bishop d1, excellent move. So planning to trade our worst piece for opponent's nice bishop, which controls f5. So bishop a4 is the idea. Rook b8, rook b1. Black went knight a8, bishop a4. So trading the bishops. Queen d7, c2. Rook b1, rook b1. So just trading rook b8, rook b8, knight b8. So black is trading a lot of pieces, but unfortunately what is remaining is not very good. Especially the f6 bishop is never going to be good. This knight will go to f5 whenever it wants. a5 pawn is a target. So basically, if you look at it this way, it's move 25 now. Only trades were happening in this game, but very good trades for white and very bad for black. So queen b3, queen a7, bishop d2, eyeing the a5 pawn, bishop d8, queen b5, king g7, and since all these pieces are ideally placed, now it's turn for the knight to show up. Knight f2, bishop c7, knight d1, queen a6. So it looks like black manages to trade the queens, which is still a losing position, because this knight can easily enter towards b5 and to attack the bishop, attack the d6 pawn, and even threaten to take the bishop, and then the a5 pawn would fall. So even that is losing, but white played a really nice move at this moment. And actually black resigned after that. He played queen e8. Seemingly this move was not possible, but the point is that in case of queen takes c4, there is knight e3. So the knight is coming to f5. And even though for a moment black can pin this knight and even attack the bishop on d2, there is simply king f1. Black takes the bishop, but after knight f5, king f6, queen h8 is a mate. So basically once the knight is on f5, black's king is getting mated. So after this nice move, queen e8, black resigned. So very nice game by white. Nice example how to break down this close type of king's Indian. I mean, with that one little inaccuracy or mistake with b4. And interesting part is that so I was looking through these games from the Polish league, and I saw that after this game, probably in the next round, Nurkiewicz himself also played the Auerbach system, so probably he liked it quite much from the white side and not really from the black one. Hope you like this video and like this queen c1 h4 idea, which is very rare and it was completely new to me, but worked pretty well in this game.